Captain Elena Vasquez leaned back in her chair, the assembly chamber's hum vibrating through the station's hull like a distant heartbeat. Cool streams from the air recyclers whispered across her skin, laced with the faint acrid tang of alien metabolisms, sulfur from the creel, ozone from the Vorth. She scanned the holographic display, the vote tally flickering in emerald light, 87% in favor. The measure had passed as expected. A binding accord on resource allocation across the Orion Arm, funneling trillions of credits to the core worlds while fringe colonies scraped by on empty promises. Beside her, Dr. Marcus Hale adjusted his glasses, fingers drumming a silent rhythm on the armrest. The cautious one, always tallying risks in his head before speaking. "It's done," he murmured, voice low to evade the translators. "No surprises." Elena nodded, but her jaw tightened. Surprises were diplomacy's currency out here, where humanity's foothold remained tentative, a patchwork of outposts clinging to asteroid belts and gas giants. The United Terran Alliance had joined the Concordance a decade ago, hungry for tech and trade, but these votes always felt like concessions disguised as alliance. She stood, smoothing creases from her uniform, its stiff fabric embedded with sensors monitoring her vitals for the medbay logs. The chamber's central dais glowed under artificial sun lamps, where Delegate Zorith of the Vorth Collective preened, his iridescent scales catching the light like oil on water. He was the Accord's architect, his faction pushing centralized control to stabilize the Arm's volatile sectors. Elena had argued against it in the prelims. Fringe worlds like Epsilon Eridani needed those resources to fend off pirate raids and stellar storms, but the numbers had spoken. Zoritha's multifaceted, unblinking eyes swept the room as the gavel's chime echoed. "Human delegation," he intoned through the universal translator, his voice a layered hiss grating on Elena's teeth. "Your abstention is noted. The Concordance appreciates your restraint. Abstention. That's what they called it when humans refused the steamroll." Elena met his gaze, her expression a mask of neutrality forged in years of frontier negotiations. Marcus shifted beside her, poised to murmur a diplomatic platitude, but she raised a hand. No words. Just a curt nod to the attendant droids, which retracted the human podium with a soft whir. As they turned toward the exit, the chamber's murmur swelled into a buzz. Whispers from the creel pods, a low trill from the avian SRYH delegation. Elena felt the weight of those stares, the unspoken question. Why walk away now? The Accord would bind them all, humanity included by proxy unless they invoked the rare opt-out clause. But invoking it meant isolation, severed trade routes, hostile patrols in neutral space. In the corridor beyond, the station's gravity plating thrummed underfoot, drawing them toward the shuttle bays. Marcus finally spoke, breath quick. "Elena, that was bold. Or reckless. The Council's expecting a statement. Walking silent? They'll spin it as weakness." She glanced at him, the corridor's dim strips casting long shadows across his lined face. "Let them spin. We've got Epsilon outposts starving for dilithium, Marcus. This Accord funnels it all to Zoritha's shipyards. Silence buys us time to reroute our own shipments without tripping their sensors." He frowned, adjusting his satchel of data pads. "And if they notice? The Vorth have patrols on the fringe. One wrong move and we're looking at blockades." Elena pushed open the hatch to the bay, the shuttle's ramp descending with a hydraulic sigh. Inside, their pilot, Lieutenant Kira Voss, was already in the cockpit, fingers dancing over pre-flight checks. Kira was the witty one, quick with a quip to cut tension, her dark hair tied back in a practical knot. "Heard the vote went swimmingly," she called over her shoulder. "You two look like you just lost a bet." "More like declined to play," Elena replied, strapping into the co-pilot's seat. The shuttle's engines cycled up, a low rumble vibrating through the frame. As the bay doors irised open to the starfield beyond, Elena watched the station recede on the view screen, a glittering wheel against the void, home to 1,000 species united in name only. Marcus settled behind them, voice thoughtful. "The opt-out clause activates in 48 hours. Humanity's compliance is noted. Resource reallocations begin immediately." Lena didn't respond. Instead, she tapped her comm device, signaling the shuttle pilots back on Earthside docks. The room hummed with the low buzz of translators and data streams, but beneath it, tension coiled like a spring. The Krell had pushed this through with promises of shared prosperity, but everyone knew it meant stripping the rim worlds bare, minerals, water, even the fragile biospheres humans had nurtured there for decades. As the session adjourned, Lena rose, smoothing her uniform. "We'll reconvene our internal review," she said evenly, her voice carrying the calm steel that had earned her the post. No arguments, no pleas. Just the statement hanging in the recycled air. The Zenthari ambassador, a cluster of floating orbs pulsing with bioluminescent curiosity, drifted closer. "Ambassador Torres, your reticence is intriguing. The Concord appreciates humanity's adaptability. Surely you see the mutual benefits." Lena met the orb's glow with a steady gaze. "We see the numbers. Always the numbers." She turned, her team falling in step. Dr. Elias Grant, the wiry xenobiologist with a perpetual frown, and Captain Mira Voss, broad-shouldered and scarred from rim patrols, her eyes scanning exits like always. They moved through the station's labyrinthine corridors, past murals of interstellar unity that now felt like propaganda. Whispers followed, the avian Trilix chirping about human stubbornness, the burly Gorvith grumbling on about weak alliances. Lena ignored it, her mind racing through contingencies. The vote was binding, but humanity hadn't signed the enforcement clause, not yet. In the docking bay their shuttle waited, engines humming softly. Mira punched in the clearance code, her knuckles white. "They're watching us leave like we're rats fleeing a flood," she muttered. Elias adjusted his glasses, peering at a tablet. "More like they're betting we won't bite back. The rim colonies report 0 incursions so far, but scans show Krell scout ships massing." Lena boarded last, settling into the pilot's seat despite protocol. "We walk away clean. No words, no waves. Let them stew." The shuttle decoupled with a gentle lurch, stars wheeling into view through the viewport. As the station shrank to a glittering speck, Lena plotted a course not for Earth, but a relay point near the rim. The real work started now, quiet, unseen, human. Back on the station, the Silphi chair watched the departure feed, scales rippling in unease. Curious. No formal protest lodged. A Krell liaison, its chitinous form clicking against the console, waved a pincer dismissively. "Primitives. They'll comply or be crushed. The vote stands." But in the void, Lena's shuttle slipped into the shadow of an asteroid belt, transmissions going dark. The first message, encrypted and burst, sent to the colonies: "Prepare for isolation protocols. We're not done voting." Captain Alara Voss gripped the armrest of her shuttle's command chair, the hum of the engines vibrating through her bones as they punched through the nebula's edge. The swirling purples and blues outside the viewport smeared into streaks, a fleeting beauty masking the radiation spikes flickering on her console. Beside her, Dr. Kai Ren leaned forward, fingers dancing over a holographic display, recalculating their trajectory for the third time since the Council's betrayal. "We should have seen it coming," Kai muttered, his voice tight with frustration from too many late nights poring over alien treaties. The cautious one, always double-checking the fine print, his sharp mind a counterweight to Alara's bold instincts. The Krell voted with the majority, but their envoy's eyes, did you notice? They were scanning the room like they already knew the outcome. Alara nodded, her jaw set. The brave type, she'd stared down pirate fleets in the outer rims without flinching, but this felt different. The vote on the Unity Accord had passed unanimously among the core species, sharing humanity's warp tech to unite the galaxy against the void storms. Easy, they said. Benevolent. But when the humans stood and walked out without a word, the chamber had erupted. Now, with the Accord's enforcers on their tail, they raced to the abandoned relay station on Epsilon Drift, the last unmonitored jump point before human space. A proximity alert blared, red lights pulsing across the cabin. Ilara's hand shot to the controls, banking hard as a Krell interceptor materialized from the nebula's haze, its crystalline hull glinting like shattered ice. "They're faster than we thought," she said, voice steady despite the adrenaline surge. The ship shuddered under evasive maneuvers, G-forces pressing them into their seats. Kai braced against the dash, pulling up sensor data. "Not just fast, they've got our signature locked. If we don't lose them in the interference field ahead, we're done." He glanced at her, worry etching lines around his eyes. Elara, this isn't a skirmish. If they board us, won't happen. She flipped switches, rerouting power to the shields, the shuttle groaning in protest. The nebula's core loomed, a churning mass of ionized gas that could fry electronics or cloak them equally well. Their plan was simple. Dive in, use the station's ancient beacons to mask their signal, then slip through the jump. But Simple assumed no pursuit this aggressive. The interceptor fired, a lance of plasma streaking past, close enough to heat the viewport. Elara rolled the shuttle, stars wheeling outside, and returned fire with their modest railgun. The shot glanced off the enemy's armor, sparks blooming in the void. Come on, you bastards, she growled, plotting a slingshot around a drifting asteroid fragment. The maneuver bought seconds, the rock's shadow swallowing their exhaust trail. Inside the nebula, visibility dropped to 0, sensors haywire with static. Kai's display glitched, then stabilized as he jury-rigged a filter. Station's 2 minutes out. But the radiation spiking, shields at 70%. He wiped sweat from his brow, his usual wit buried under the strain. No quips now, just the raw edge of survival. Elara felt the weight of it all, the Council's greed exposed, humanity's isolation deepening with every light year. They'd walked away to protect their tech, their independence, but at what cost? A single failed jump, and the Accord's forces would overrun the drift colonies. She pushed the throttle, the shuttle surging forward, engines straining against the plasma winds. Alarms wailed again as the Krell ship reappeared on their flank, closing fast. Elara's mind raced, piecing together a desperate adaptation. Vent the auxiliary coolant to create a false heat signature, draw them off course. Kai, reroute the vents, now? He complied without question, fingers flying. A plume of superheated gas erupted from their side, blooming like a decoy flare in the nebula's glow. The interceptor veered toward it, buying precious breathing room. The station's silhouette emerged on sensors, a skeletal relic from the pre-contact era, its docking arms outstretched like forgotten arms. They docked with a metallic clang, the airlock cycling as the nebula raged outside. Elara unstrapped first, grabbing her toolkit while Kai sealed the logs. That was too close, he said, exhaling sharply. But we're in. Now what? The jump core's unpowered, could take hours to bootstrap. She met his gaze, dim emergency lights casting shadows on her determined face. Then we make it work. Humanity didn't build this galaxy by waiting for permission. As they ventured into the station's echoing corridors, the distant rumble of the Krell ship echoed through the hull, a reminder that their walkout had ignited a chase with no easy end. Captain Elara Voss gripped the armrest of her shuttle's co-pilot seat, the hum of the engines vibrating through her bones as they skimmed the asteroid's craggy surface. The rock loomed outside the viewport, a jagged behemoth scarred by millennia of cosmic battering, its surface pocked with craters that swallowed light. Beside her, Jax, the wiry engineer with grease-streaked cheeks and a perpetual squint, tapped furiously at his console, rerouting power from non-essentials to the scanners. Got a signal, Jax muttered, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. Weak, but it's there, buried under that ridge. Looks like the probe's casing held, but the core's fried. Elara nodded, her jaw tight. The vote back on the station had been a farce. Species after species piping up in their holographic feeds, all eager to claim the mineral rights without lifting a finger. Humanity's quiet exit had left them scrambling, but out here in the void's unforgiving grip, words meant nothing. This asteroid was their stake, the key to rare isotopes that could power a fleet or bankrupt a colony. Losing the probe meant starting over, and they couldn't afford that with the Krillari patrols sniffing closer every cycle. She banked the shuttle left, dodging a spire of ice-laced stone that thrust up like a frozen spear. The external challenge wasn't just the rock, it was the failing NAV systems, glitching from the asteroid's magnetic interference. One wrong maneuver and they'd be pulverized debris. How long to extract? She asked, eyes flicking to the proximity alert blinking red. Jax wiped sweat from his brow, fingers dancing over holographic keys. 10 minutes if we're lucky. But the maglocks are jammed, need to EVA for a manual override. He glanced at her, his usual wit subdued by the stakes. No quips about human stubbornness today, just the raw edge of necessity. Ilara unstrapped, pulling on her suit with practiced efficiency. The air recyclers hissed as she sealed the helmet, the faceplate fogging briefly before clearing. I'll go. Keep her steady. She didn't wait for protest. Jax knew better. As the airlock cycled, the shuttle's lights cast long shadows across the landing gear, illuminating the probe's mangled form wedged in a crevice below. Outside, the vacuum was absolute silence, broken only by her suit's comms crackling with Jax's updates. Magnetic boots clunked against the hull, each step a deliberate pull toward the edge. The asteroid's surface stretched out, a desolate gray expanse dusted with regolith that swirled in zero-G eddies. She rappelled down, the line taut against her gloves, heart pounding in rhythm with the winch's whine. The probe lay half-buried, its solar panels shattered like broken wings. Ilara knelt, her tools glinting in the shuttle's floodlights, and pried at the access panel. It budged, then stuck, warped metal from the impact. Jax, boost the thrusters on my mark. Need to shift this slab. I cap. 3-2. The ground trembled as microbursts fired, dislodging enough rubble for her to wrench the panel free. Inside, the core pulsed faintly, a dying heartbeat of blue light. She extracted the data chip with steady hands, slotting it into her suit's port. Downloads raced across her HUD, logs of the deposit, pure and vast, enough to tip the scales back home. But as she turned to ascend, a shadow flickered on the ridge above. Not a rockfall. Krillari scout drone, sleek and predatory, its sensors whirring to life. Alarms blared in her helmet. They'd been too late, the vote's fallout had drawn hunters. Ilara clipped the line and yanked herself up, boots firing in staccato bursts. Jax, we've got company. Punch it. The shuttle lurched as she hauled aboard, the airlock slamming shut behind her. Jax was already spinning them away, engines roaring against the rock's pull. The drone pursued, firing a warning pulse that grazed their shields, sparks dancing across the viewport. Ilara strapped in, chip clutched in her fist, the weight of what they'd salvaged pressing against the rising dread. This wasn't over. The Real vote was out here in the debris and the dark. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the armrest of her command chair as the Odyssey-S bridge hummed with urgent activity. The view screen flickered with a distorted feed from the relay buoy, showing the armada of alien vessels closing in on their position. 3 days out from the Sol exclusion zone, and the Krell Dominion had already dispatched interceptors, sleek, predatory ships that outmatched the Odyssey in speed and firepower. Ilara's jaw tightened. She'd anticipated pursuit, but not this soon. Status on the engines, Mira? She asked, her voice steady despite the knot in her gut. Mira, the chief engineer, wiped sweat from her brow, fingers dancing over a holographic console. Cautious by nature, she always double-checked her readouts, and now her eyes narrowed at the fluctuating power levels. Holding at 80%, Captain. But those Krell bastards are pushing their drives hard. If we divert more to shields, we risk a cascade failure in the warp coils. Ilara nodded, glancing at Jax, her tactical officer. He leaned forward, his witty grin absent for once, replaced by a focused scowl. They're hailing us again, Cap. Same demand. Stand down and return to the Council Nexus 4 reconciliation talks. As if we haven't heard that line before. Patch it through, Ilara said. The screen split, revealing the angular face of Commander Vree, his tentacles undulating in what passed for Krell agitation. His voice rasped through the translator, laced with synthetic menace. Human Vessel Odyssey, this is your final warning. The Galactic Concordance vote was binding. Your withdrawal threatens the stability of the Veil Accords. Surrender your navigation logs, or we will enforce compliance. Ilara met his gaze evenly, her brave resolve shining through in the way she didn't flinch. Humanity had walked away from that vote not in anger, but in quiet certainty. The Accords had become a noose, strangling innovation with endless bureaucracy. No speeches, no ultimatums. Just ships turning tail, leaving the council chambers echoing with stunned silence. But the Krell, ever the enforcers, couldn't let it go. Commander Vree, she replied, her tone measured, the vote passed on your terms. We're exercising ours. No logs, no talks. Stand off or we'll make this messy. Vree's eyes narrowed, a ripple of color flashing across his skin. You primitives dare defy the Concordance? Your ingenuity is a myth, Without our tech, you'd still be flinging rocks. Jax snorted softly beside her, but Ilara held her ground. We've got grit enough to prove you wrong. Odyssey asterisk out. The channel cut, and alarms blared as the Krell ships accelerated. Ilara's mind raced. Evasion was their only play, but the nearest jump point was a minefield of debris from an old war. Mira, reroute auxiliary power to maneuvering thrusters. Jax, plot a slingshot around that asteroid cluster. We're not fighting, we're running smarter. The ship lurched as the first energy lance grazed their shields, sparks dancing across the bulkheads. Mira cursed under her breath, her hands a blur as she stabilized the core. Shields at 60%. If they hit us again, they won't, Ilara interrupted, standing now, her presence an anchor for the crew. Trust the plan. Humanity didn't build this far by playing fair. Jax's fingers flew over his panel, his usual quips silenced by concentration. The Odyssey banked sharply, engines whining in protest, weaving through the asteroid field's jagged teeth. A Krell interceptor exploded against a drifting rock, debris blooming like a brief flower in the void. Another veered too close, its weapons charging, but Jax anticipated, firing a precise burst from their railguns, not to destroy but to nudge the enemy into a collision course. Vria's voice boomed over the comms again, furious. Cease this folly. The Council will isolate your worlds. Ilara ignored him, her eyes locked on the tactical display. The jump point loomed, a swirling maw of hyperspace. One more dodge and they were through. But as the Odyssey surged forward, a warning light flashed, structural integrity dropping. A microfracture in the hull, courtesy of that glancing hit. Air hissed from a sealed compartment, and Myra's face paled. Captain, we can't jump with that breach. It'll tear us apart. Ilara's heart pounded, but she forced calm into her voice. Patch it. Whatever it takes. The crew moved like a single organism. Jax laying down suppressing fire, Mira barking orders to damage control teams, Ilara coordinating from the center. Sweat beaded on her forehead as the Krell closed the gap, their lances painting the stars with lethal light. In that moment the cost hit home, not just the ship but the fragile hope of a free humanity adrift without allies. Then, with a shudder that rattled teeth, the Odyssey sealed the breach just as the jump field engaged. Reality folded, and they vanished into the blue shift, leaving the Krell fleet grasping at empty space. But Ilara knew the pursuit wasn't over. The fracture in their hull mirrored the growing rift in the galaxy. One small victory bought with strain that would linger. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the armrests of her command chair, the hum of the ship's engines vibrating through the deck like a distant heartbeat. The view screen flickered with stars streaking past, but her focus was on the engineering console where sparks danced from a fried panel. Status, Ramirez, she barked, her voice steady despite the acrid smell of burning circuits. Lieutenant Marco Ramirez wiped sweat from his brow, fingers flying over the auxiliary controls. Sabotage confirmed, Cap. They slipped a virus into our NAV systems during docking at the Council station. We're blind, coordinates are scrambling, and the warp core's fluctuating. He glanced up, his usual grin absent, eyes shadowed by the red emergency lights. The crew of the UNS Endurance had been prepped for fallout from the walkout, but not this. Not the Krell Dominion's subtle knife in the dark. Ilara's mind raced. The vote had passed easily, binding the galaxy to their resource lockdown, but humanity's silent exit had shattered the fragile peace. Now with the Council's enforcers, those sleek Krell hunters, likely closing in, a crippled ship meant capture or worse. She turned to Dr. Lena Kai, the xenobiologist strapped into the seat beside her, who was already pulling up holographic schematics on her tablet. Lena's cautious nature had saved them before, her quiet analysis spotting flaws others missed. Ideas? Ilara asked, keeping it short. Lena's fingers paused, her dark eyes narrowing at the display. The virus is adaptive, rewriting itself every cycle. Standard purge won't stick. But if we isolate the core's auxiliary buffer and route it through the environmental recyclers, it's unorthodox, but the biofilters might disrupt the code's pattern without frying the whole system. She didn't elaborate. Time was their enemy. Ilara nodded, trusting the woman's grit. Lena had argued against the walkout in briefings, calling it reckless. But now her focus was laser-sharp, no room for doubt. Ramirez, reroute power to the recyclers. Kai, guide him. Ilara unstrapped and stood, the ship lurching as another glitch hit the stabilizers. Alarms blared, and she steadied herself against the console. Below decks, the faint clangs of the engineering team echoed up, 20 souls relying on this fix. The Krell wouldn't negotiate. Their history was full of absorbed fleets, silent takeovers. Humanity's departure had been a statement, but statements didn't shield against plasma torpedoes. As Ramirez initiated the bypass, the lights dimmed, then surged back. Lena leaned in, murmuring adjustments. Slow the flow, yes, like that. The filters are degrading the viral strands. A bead of sweat traced her temple, but her voice held firm. Ilara watched the NAV screen flicker to life, stars realigning into coherent paths. Not perfect, but enough to plot a course toward the outer rim, away from the Council's grasp. The ship groaned, a final shudder rippling through the hull as the virus fragmented. Ramirez hooped softly, slumping back. We're clear, Cap. But the core's taken a hit, efficiency down 30%. We won't outrun them forever. Ilara allowed a tight smile, clapping Lena on the shoulder. Better than dead in the water. Set course for the nebula cluster, it'll mask our signature. As the Endurance surged forward, the weight of their isolation settled in. The vote's echo lingered, a reminder that walking away had cost them allies, but it had also freed them to fight on their terms. Outside, the void swallowed their trail, but Ilara knew the hunters were out there, closing the net. The dim hum of the ship's engines vibrated through the deck plates, a constant reminder that they were running on borrowed time. Alex leaned against the console in the engineering bay, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. The air recyclers were straining, pulling in the metallic tang of overheating circuits. Zara hovered nearby, her elongated fingers dancing over a holographic display, her iridescent scales flickering with anxiety under the harsh lights. We can't keep pushing her like this, Thorne muttered from beneath the access panel, his voice echoing muffled. Tools clattered as he wrestled with a stubborn conduit. The human engineer's broad shoulders strained against his jumpsuit, grease smudged across his cheek like war paint. He'd been the one to jury-rig the hyperdrive after the Council's blockade, but now it was faltering, coughing out error codes like a dying animal. Zara's eyes narrowed, her cautious nature bubbling up in a sharp hiss. Pushing leads to breaking. We've evaded their scouts for 3 jumps, but the signatures are converging. If we don't recalibrate the dampeners, they'll lock on before the next relay. Alex nodded, his witty edge dulled by fatigue. No quips today. The vote's aftermath had stripped away the humor. Walking away from the Galactic Concord had been a silent thunderclap, humanity's delegates rising without a word, ships peeling off into the void. The aliens had blinked first, their easy passage of the Resource Reclamation Act suddenly hollow. But now, with Crix's enforcers on their tail, silence felt like a noose tightening. Recalibrate how? Alex asked, glancing at the flickering map. Red blips closed in from 3 vectors, a net of pursuit ships that outgunned their lone freighter. The plan had been simple: slip into the nebula's interference field, mask their trail, and rendezvous with the human outpost on Epsilon Drift. Thorne's modifications were supposed to buy them hours. Instead they'd bought minutes. Thorne slid out from under the panel, hauling himself up with a grunt. His brave streak shone in the set of his jaw, undeterred. We vent plasma through the auxiliary ports, create a false echo, make it look like we're splitting course. It'll fry the outer shields, but we gain distance. Zara recoiled, her tail lashing once. Venting plasma? That's not adaptation, that's suicide. The nebula will ionize the exhaust, light us up like a beacon. They argued in the tight space, voices overlapping as the ship lurched. Alex mediated with clipped words, his mind racing through contingencies. The cost was already mounting. Their water reserves dipped low from the evasive maneuvers, rations stretched thin. One wrong move and the crew, his crew, would pay in ways the Council's vote never imagined. Try it, Alex decided finally, meeting Thorne's eyes. But prep the escape pods as backup. Thorne dove back in, sparks flying as he rerouted power. The ship groaned, a deep shudder rippling through the hull. Alarms blared, dampeners failing, signatures spiking. Zara monitored from her station, her calculations a blur of light. For a heartbeat it worked. The map showed phantom trails branching out, the pursuers scattering to chase ghosts. Alex allowed a tight smile. Human grit, turning scraps into stratagems. Then the console lit up crimson. Feedback surge, Zara whispered, horror etching her features. The plasma vent had backfired, overloading the core relays. The hyperdrive whined to a halt, stranding them in the nebula's swirling heart. Purple gases churned outside the viewport, a beautiful trap closing in. Thorn cursed, slamming a fist against the panel. Shields at 20%. They're coming fast. Alex straightened, the weight of command settling heavier. The easy vote back at the Concorde felt worlds away, its consequences crashing down here, in the void's unforgiving embrace. They had to adapt, now, or the silence would be permanent. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the edge of the console, her knuckles whitening against the humming metal. The shuttle's engines thrummed low, a steady vibration that matched the pulse in her temples. Outside the viewport, the asteroid field's debris spun lazily, jagged rocks the size of starships, remnants of some long-forgotten mining war. Her team was down to 3 now. Herself, the wiry engineer Jax with his perpetual squint, and Lyra, the avian diplomat from the fringe worlds, her feathers ruffled from the latest skirmish. "We can't keep dodging like this," Jax muttered, his fingers flying over the NAV controls. A proximity alert blared, and he banked hard left, the shuttle groaning as it skimmed past a tumbling boulder. Fuel's at 20%. One more evasion and we're space dust. Ilara shot him a glance, her voice steady despite the knot in her gut. "Then make it count. Lyra, any sign of pursuit?" The alien perched on the co-pilot's seat, her taloned feet clicking against the floor. She tilted her head, eyes scanning the sensor readout with that unnatural focus of hers. 3 signatures closing fast. Coalition scouts, Krell design. They're not hailing. This is no coincidence. Ilara nodded, the pieces clicking into place. The vote back on the Galactic Assembly had been a farce. The measure to cede the Outer Rim territories passed with overwhelming support, all because humanity's quiet abstention had been spun as approval. No speeches, no protests, just the human delegation rising and walking out, doors hissing shut behind them. Now the coalition was enforcing it with patrols, treating the silence as surrender. But Ilara's crew had been en route to broker a shadow alliance with the Independents when the interceptors jumped them. "Options?" she asked, keeping her tone clipped. No time for doubt. Jax wiped sweat from his brow. "We hit the nebula in 10 minutes. Cover there, but it'll scramble our comms. Could lose contact with the fleet." Lyra's beak clicked thoughtfully. "Or we double back, use the field for a slingshot maneuver. Risky, but it might shake them." Ilara waited, the weight of command pressing down. Jax was the cautious one, always calculating margins. Lyra, bold and intuitive, saw paths where others saw walls. She trusted them this far, through the assembly halls and the first ambush. "Slingshot it is." Jax, plot the trajectory. Lyra prepped the decoy drone. "If they bite, we buy time." The engineer grumbled but complied, his hands blurring across the panels. The shuttle lurched into a wide arc, engines flaring blue against the void. Alarms wailed as the first Krell ship locked on, a warning shot streaking past like a comet's tail. "They're firing." Lyra squawked, launching the drone with a flick of her wing. It burst from the bay, mimicking their signature, veering into the denser debris. Ilara strapped in tighter, the G-forces pulling at her like invisible hands. The viewport filled with rock shadows, the slingshot curve tightening. Jax's voice cut through the strain, holding, now." The shuttle whipped around a massive asteroid, gravity assist propelling them into open space. The pursuing ships hesitated, one peeling off after the drone, exploding in a silent bloom of fire against a hidden spike. The others broke pursuit, their vectors thrown by the maneuver. Breathing hard, Ilara unbuckled. "Good work. But that's one less decoy." Jax slumped back, exhaling. "Fleet still dark. If the nebulas are only play, we're going in blind." Lyra smoothed her feathers, her eyes gleaming with that fierce camaraderie humans called grit. "Blind or not, we're not ceding anything. The Independents are waiting, let's remind the coalition what walking away really means. Elara allowed a thin smile, the tension easing just enough. The nebula loomed ahead, a swirling veil of gas and stars, promising cover but hiding its own hazards. They plunged in, the colors shifting from black to ethereal purple, sensors flickering to static. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. No votes, no assemblies, just the raw ingenuity that had carried humanity this far. But in the back of her mind, the cost lingered. The lost ship, the strained alliances, the whisper that one wrong turn could unravel everything. Captain Elara Voss gripped the armrest of her command chair, the hum of the ship's engines vibrating through her bones like a distant earthquake. The view screen flickered with the asteroid field's chaotic dance, jagged rocks tumbling in lazy orbits, lit by the faint glow of a distant binary star. Her crew, down to just her engineer Tarek Hale, and the unexpected ally, Zerlon the Vexery scout, huddled in the dim bridge. Tarek's fingers flew over the console, sweat beading on his forehead despite the recycled air's chill. "We've got maybe 10 minutes before that debris cloud hits," Tarek said, his voice steady but edged with the strain of too many all-nighters. He was the cautious one, always double-checking seals and backups, but even he couldn't hide the flicker of doubt in his eyes. The initial plan, to slingshot around the largest asteroid and evade the pursuing Krell patrol, had crumbled when their thrusters glitched courtesy of a sabotaged fuel line. Now they were boxed in, the field tightening like a noose. Zerlon's multifaceted eyes gleamed under the console lights, his chitinous limbs clicking as he adjusted a makeshift sensor array. The Vexery was all sharp angles and quiet intensity, a defector who joined them after the council vote turned sour. The Krell signatures are closing. 3 vessels, weapons hot. Your human ingenuity, will it suffice this time? Elara shot him a wry glance, her brave streak pushing back the knot in her gut. It better. Tarek, reroute auxiliary power to the gravitics. If we can't outrun them, we'll make them regret chasing us. She leaned forward, plotting a desperate vector on the holographic display. The image showed their battered freighter, the Odyssey, dwarfed by the encroaching rocks. One wrong nudge and they'd be pulverized, a real cost, not just some diplomatic spat. Tarek nodded, his hands blurring across the controls. Sparks flew from a nearby panel, the acrid smell of ozone cutting the air. Rerouting now. But Captain, this'll overload the core in 5. We adapt or we fry. The ship lurched as the first debris wave buffeted them, a low groan echoing through the hull. Elara's mind raced. The vote back on the Galactic Accord had been a farce, humanity's quiet exit leaving them stranded in uncharted space, resources dwindling. This chase was the fallout, the Krell enforcing their consensus with plasma cannons. No speeches, no grandstands, just survival. Zerlon's voice cut through the tension, calm as a still pond. The field has a resonance. Small asteroids vibrate at a frequency. Push them and they chain react. Risky, but your kind thrives on such edges. Elara's lips quirked in a half smile. Chain reaction it is. Tarek, sync the emitters to Zerlon's frequency. Let's turn this graveyard into their nightmare. As the Krell ships loomed on the scanner, closing the gap with predatory grace, Tarek hit the command. The Odyssey shuddered, gravitic pulses rippling out like stones in water. The nearest rocks trembled, then accelerated, colliding in a cascading fury. Debris erupted in a swirling maelstrom, slamming into the lead Krell vessel with a silent, screen-shaking fury. Alarms blared, hull integrity dropping, a direct hit grazing their flank. Elara braced, tasting blood from a bitten lip. The second Krell ship veered, but the chain caught it, shearing off engines in a bloom of fire. Victory edged closer, but the cost mounted, their own systems flickering, life support straining. They're breaking off, Tarek breathed, slumping back as the field cleared a narrow path. Zerlon nodded approval, his mandibles clicking softly. But Elara knew the lingering shadow. Repairs would take weeks, and the Accord's silence meant no rescue. They'd won this skirmish through grit and alliance, but the stars felt colder now, the walkaways weighed heavier on their shoulders. Captain Elara Voss gripped the edge of the console, her knuckles whitening against the cold metal. The bridge of the Endeavour hummed with the low thrum of failing systems, red emergency lights casting jagged shadows across the faces of her crew. Jax, her wiry engineer, wiped sweat from his brow, his fingers dancing over a makeshift patch panel. "It's holding barely," he muttered, voice tight. "But if that plasma surge hits again, we're venting atmosphere." Across from her, Ambassador Lyric floated in the zero-G harness, his iridescent scales flickering with unease. The Zalari diplomat had been their reluctant ally since the walkout. Humanity's silent exodus from the Galactic Concord had stranded him with them, his shuttle damaged in the chaos. "The fleet is closing," he said, his translator buzzing softly. "Their sensors will detect us soon. Why did your people not fight the vote? We could have swayed it." Elara shot him a glance, her jaw set. She wasn't one for regrets, not after the Concord's easy passage of the Resource Edict, siphoning human colonies dry to fund their endless wars. Walking away had been the only vote that mattered, a unified silence from every human delegate. But now, pursued by Concord enforcers through the Nebula Veil, that choice felt like a noose tightening. "Fighting words won't fix this," she replied, eyes on the holographic display. The nebula's swirling gases masked their trail, but not for long. A sharp alarm pierced the air. Jax cursed, slamming a fist against the panel. "Breach in the auxiliary drive, it's the surge. We're losing propulsion." The ship lurched, gravity flickering as inertial dampeners strained. Elara unstrapped, pushing off toward the engineering bay. "Hold her steady, Jax. Lyric, monitor comms for any Concord chatter." The corridor lights stuttered as she moved, hand over hand along the railings. Sparks flew from a junction box, singeing her sleeve. The challenge wasn't just the pursuers, it was the nebula itself, a graveyard of ionized storms that chewed through shields like acid. Their early plan, slingshotting around a gas giant to lose the tail, had backfired spectacularly, frying half their engines when a micrometeor storm hit mid-maneuver. Now they were limping, one bad hit from becoming debris. In the bay, Elara found the problem, a ruptured conduit spewing superheated plasma. She grabbed a sealant kit, her cautious side screaming to call Jax, but time was a luxury they didn't have. Gritting her teeth, she plunged in, the heat blistering her gloves. "Come on, you bastard," she whispered, forcing the foam into the breach. It hissed and sealed, but not before a jolt sent her sprawling against the bulkhead. Back on the bridge, Lyric's eyes widened at the sensor ping. "They've locked on. Torpedoes inbound, 3 minutes." Jax's face paled, but he nodded, rerouting power with frantic efficiency. Elara burst through the hatch, singed but steady. "We adapt or we die. Jax, vent the forward bays, make it look like we're breaking apart. Lyric, jam their frequencies with that Zalari trick of yours." Lyric hesitated, his fins twitching. Among his people, deception was a grave offense, but the Concord's betrayal had cracked his loyalty. "For survival," he agreed, activating the modulator. A burst of harmonic interference flooded the channels, garbling the enemy's targeting data. The ship shuddered as the torpedoes streaked past, detonating harmlessly in the nebula's haze. Elara exhaled, slumping into her chair. But the display showed the fleet adjusting course, undeterred. Jax grinned faintly, wiping his hands. "Clever, Cap. But they're not done. We've bought minutes, not miles." As the nebulous tendrils coiled closer, Elara felt the weight of their isolation. Humanity's walkout had sparked whispers of rebellion across the fringes, but here in the void, it was just them, 3 souls against the stars. The cost was etched in every scar on the hull, every strained breath. Yet in that grit, she saw the spark. Not conquest, but the quiet defiance that had always defined her kind. "Plot a course through the core storms," she ordered. "We go deeper. They won't follow." The Endeavor groaned in protest, diving into the maelstrom, where lightning arced like veins of fire and the air crackled with unseen fury. Lyric strapped in tighter, murmuring a Zalari prayer. Jax chuckled nervously. "Into the heart of it. Humanity's specialty, huh?" Elara didn't answer, her gaze fixed ahead. The storms would test them, strip them bare, but they'd emerge, changed, perhaps broken, but unbroken. The vote had passed, but the real trial was just beginning. Captain Elara Voss gripped the railing of the observation deck, her knuckles white against the cold alloy. The stars outside the viewport blurred into streaks as the Endeavor pushed through the nebula's edge, its engines humming with a strain that echoed her own frayed nerves. Beside her, Dr. Kai Ren leaned over the console, his fingers dancing across holographic displays, recalibrating the shields for the third time in an hour. "The interference is worsening," he muttered, his voice steady but laced with the caution that had kept him alive through a dozen crises. "If we don't punch through soon, we'll be sitting ducks for whatever's chasing us." Across the deck, Lieutenant Mira Solis paced, her boots thudding softly on the grated floor. Witty under fire, she shot Kai a grin that didn't reach her eyes. "Ducks. More like the galaxy's favorite piñata. Remember that time on Zirion Prime when we jury-rigged the comms array with chewing gum and spite? This can't be worse." But her hand hovered near the sidearm at her hip, a telltale sign the humor was armor, not certainty. The challenge had escalated since the vote, that cursed assembly on the core station where the Galactic Concord had rubber-stamped the resource seizure without a backward glance. Humanity's delegation had risen, silent, and walked out, severing ties in a move that rippled shockwaves across the stars. Now, stranded in uncharted space with a failing hyperdrive and a swarm of Concord enforcers on their tail, the cost felt all too real. The Endeavor carried not just their crew but prototypes of human tech that could tip the balance, if they survived to deliver it. Elara straightened, her brave resolve a quiet fire. "Kai, what's our window?" She didn't wait for the full answer, already turning to Mira. "Get the engineering team prepped for manual override. If the drive glitches again, we're going EVA to reroute the power core ourselves." Kai's eyes flicked up, a flicker of doubt crossing his face. "Captain, the nebulous plasma storms could fry us out there. One wrong move, then we make the right ones." Elara's voice cut through, firm but not harsh. She knew the risks. They'd lost good people in simulations alone. But walking away from the vote hadn't been surrender, it was a declaration. Humanity wouldn't beg, they'd build, adapt, endure. Mira stopped pacing, nodding sharply. "On it. And if those enforcers get too close? I've got a few surprises in the torpedo bays, human surprises." As alarms blared a warning of incoming signatures, the deck lights dimmed, casting long shadows. Elara felt the ship's pulse quicken, mirroring her own. The plan they'd cobbled together hours ago, using the nebula's magnetic fields to mask their trail, had held, but barely. Now, with the enforcers closing, it was time to adapt or break. Kai slammed a fist on the console, pulling up a new scan. "They're deploying drones. Fast ones. We veer port, we might slingshot around the storm core." Elara met his gaze, seeing the unspoken weight. Failure here meant not just their lives but humanity's isolation deepening into vulnerability. "Do it. Mira, coordinate fire support from the auxiliary pods." The ship lurched as Kai executed the maneuver, inertial dampeners whining in protest. Through the viewport, the nebula's glowing tendrils whipped past, a chaotic ballet of ionized gas that painted the crew's faces in ethereal blues and violets. Mira barked orders into her comm, her wit giving way to clipped efficiency. "Pods launching. Aim for the lead drone's ventral array. Hit him where it hurts." Explosions bloomed in the void, silent fireworks against the stellar haze. One drone shattered, debris spiraling into the storm. But more pressed in, their beams lancing through the interference, scoring the Endeavor's hull with near misses that rattled the deck. Elara braced against the shake, her mind racing. The initial evasion had bought time, but the Enforcers' tech outmatched them in raw power. They needed cleverness now, human cleverness. Kai reversed the shield polarity. Channel the nebula's charge back at them. It'll overload their sensors. He hesitated a beat, then grinned faintly, the cautious scientist yielding to ingenuity. Risky but, yes. His hands flew, rerouting flows that no alien ship would dare attempt. The ship shuddered as energy surged, the viewport flaring with redirected plasma. Drones faltered, their formations scattering like startled birds. Mira whooped from her station. "That's our captain, turning their playground into a minefield." But triumph soured quick. A massive enforcer vessel broke through the chaos, its weapons locking on. Alarms screamed hull breach imminent. Elara's heart pounded. The cost was here, tangible, the risk of losing everything they'd walked away to protect. "Brace," she called as the first volley struck. Sparks flew from consoles and Kai slumped, clutching a singed arm. Mira dove to cover him, firing manual countermeasures. In that haze of smoke and urgency, Ilara saw the path forward, not retreat but one final desperate push. The hyperdrive flickered back online, unstable but alive. All hands, initiate jump sequence. We're getting out, on our terms. The stars warped as they leaped, the enforcer's fire grazing their tail. Lingering in the jump's wake was the scar of battle, a reminder that walking away had ignited a firestorm. But in the quiet after, as the Endeavor limped toward safe space, Ilara knew, the real vote was just beginning. The council chamber's vast dome echoed with the murmurs of 1,000 alien delegates, their bioluminescent skins flickering in hues of confusion and outrage. Ambassador Krell of the Zorathian Collective slammed a tentacle against the podium, his voice booming through the translators. This is unprecedented. Humanity's silence insults the entire galactic accord. The vote on resource allocation passed unanimously, except for your abstention. Explain yourselves. Captain Elena Vasquez stood at the human delegation station, her posture unyielding amid the holographic displays that still glowed with the tally: 847 in favor, 152 abstentions, 0 against. She met Krell's multifaceted eyes without flinching, her flight suit crisp despite the long journey from the Sol Fringe. Beside her, Dr. Liam Chen adjusted his glasses, fingers tapping a subtle code into his wrist. Calm, not panic but preparation. The third human, Engineer Mira Patel, leaned against the console, arms crossed, her dark hair tied back in a practical knot that spoke of zero tolerance for bureaucracy. Elena let the silence stretch, a weapon honed from years of first contact negotiations gone sideways. The chamber's air recyclers hummed softly, carrying the faint scent of ionized plasma from the neighboring seats. Finally, she spoke, her voice calm and measured, cutting through the din like a laser. The vote passed easily, Ambassador. We acknowledge that. But participation is an obligation. Humanity is walking away, not in protest but in pursuit of our own path. Gasps rippled across the floor. A feathered delegate from the Aviaran Enclave fluttered its wings in agitation. Your own path? The Accord provides mutual defense against the void storms. Without unified resources, the outer rims will fracture. Liam stepped forward, his analytical mind already dissecting the room's dynamics. He'd spent decades modeling interstellar economies, but this wasn't about numbers anymore. The void storms are real threats, he agreed, his tone earnest, no trace of condescension. We've lost ships to them, same as you. But pooling resources under terms that favor core worlds leaves the fringes, our fringes, exposed. We've calculated the risks. Staying means subsidizing your stability at the cost of ours. Mira snorted softly, her engineer's pragmatism bubbling up. We've jury-rigged more hull breaches in a single storm than your fleet see in a cycle. We don't need your scraps to survive. Her words weren't boastful, they were fact, etched from grease-stained hands and sleepless repairs on frontier outposts. Krell's tentacles writhed. Arrogance. The Accord has endured for millennia. You primitives joined barely a generation ago and now threaten to unravel it. Elena's jaw tightened, but she kept her response steady, drawing on the grit that had carried her through the Battle of Epsilon Drift. Not unravel, redefine. We're not walking away without a word, we're leaving with one: independence. She activated her comm, projecting a schematic into the chamber's central holofield. It wasn't a weapon or a threat, but a blueprint. Human-designed storm shields, modular and scalable, forged from salvaged wrecks and sheer ingenuity. This is what we've built without your oversight. Share it if you want alliance on equal terms. Otherwise, we'll weather the voids alone. The chamber fell into stunned quiet, broken only by the low whir of data streams as delegates accessed the open-source files. Liam watched the upload spike, a small smile creasing his face. Camaraderie across species, earned through transparency, not force. Mira clapped him on the shoulder, her cautious optimism peeking through. Told you they'd bite. Elena turned from the podium, the weight of the decision settling like dust after a solar flare. As the human shuttle detached from the station, Earth loomed in the viewport, a blue marble unbowed. The Accord would adapt or fracture. Either way, humanity's silence had spoken volumes. Storms brewed on the horizon, but they'd face them with tools of their own making, and the lingering scar of isolation, a reminder that triumph always carried its shadow.